Welcome to Suddenly Different, where we explore stories and strategies for life when it doesn't go to plan. I'm Leigh-Anne Charland, inviting you to join me on this journey. Long before Len May began studying genetics, he was trying to understand his own difference. He was 7 when he arrived in America from Lithuania, old enough to know that he had entered a world whose language, expectations and rules he would need to learn, and pretty quickly. But some differences are harder to translate. Len was diagnosed with attention deficit disorder and prescribed medication that did not feel right for him. The message surrounding the diagnosis was one many children quietly absorb. There is something wrong with the way you are. Then, at 17, the struggle over who Len was and how he was coping reached a breaking point. His father gave him 5 minutes to pack his bag and leave home. What followed were motel rooms, friends' couches, his grandmother's couch, and eventually he got the money together, thanks to his grandmother, and bought a roach-filled apartment that flooded when it rained. It was far from safe or comfortable, but it was his. It was a start. Len's life could easily be told as a remarkable journey from homelessness to entrepreneurship. But that would make it sound far neater than a human life ever is, because Len didn't simply climb towards success. He kept moving through music, technology, consulting, real estate, medicinal cannabis, entrepreneurship, genetics and precision health, sometimes following meaning, sometimes following dopamine, sometimes leaving when a life that looked successful no longer felt like it. Today, Len is the founder and CEO of EndoDNA, the host of Everything is Personal, and the author of Jack of All Trades, Master of Some. His work explores something deeply personal, what becomes possible when we stop measuring people against what is considered normal and begin understanding how uniquely each of us is wired. But beneath the science is a question many of us carry. How much of our life is shaped by who we are, and how much by what happened when the people around us did not know how to understand us? Len, welcome to Suddenly Different.
Thank you. What a wonderful introduction. I was going to ask if I can get a copy of that, and I'll use for PR purposes. So
Yeah,
good.
absolutely. Absolutely. Well, that all came out of our conversation, and we could have spoken for hours. And today we get to have one of those hours together. So before we talk about the man, you, who has spent most of your life decoding the human difference, is it okay if we talk a little bit about the little boy and what do you remember about him?
Yeah, we can talk about anything you want. What I remember, there's a few things like the immigration process was really interesting. I mean, I remember it vividly. It took us 6 months to get to America from Lithuania. So planes, trains, automobiles, all that stuff.
Yeah.
Through Poland, then lived in Austria, then from there, Italy, and then finally made it back in different parts of Italy, finally made it back or made it to New York. And we flew from, I think it was Rome to New York, and we landed. And I was just like, wow, big skyscrapers. It was so amazing. And then got into a van and drove to Philadelphia. And like Northeast Philadelphia was nowhere close to being like New York City that I just saw. So it was an interesting, eye-opening experience. Welcome to America at that point. And we stayed with my mom's like third or fourth cousin because that was the only relative in a basement in an apartment with the 3 of them. And their son wasn't really nice to me and was pretty abusive, I would say. In the playground, we would be on swings and he would try to swing me into the pole and all that stuff. Yeah, it was interesting. Maybe he was jealous that I was getting attention or something. Then it was during the Cold War with the Soviet Union, and we escaped the Soviet Union, and everybody still in America was calling me Russian. You're Russian, and your mom wears combat boots. So we would get into it, and I met friends who were also like immigrants, and we started getting altercations with the local population, I would say, as a kid. So that was interesting. And then school, school was an interesting environment. By the way, just in terms of being poor, we would get our furniture from trash. So my dad got some car for a few $100s. My dad has 2 master's degrees. Was an engineer, and my mom was an accountant slash bookkeeper. They were educated, professional people, but you can't get a job right away in the US. So they had to go learn language and all that, and had odd jobs. So we got a really, ghetto apartment, and this is perspective. And I just want to kind of emphasize that because I think it's so interesting. My mom was mortified that we would drive around and pick stuff out of the trash. My dad was like, oh my God, they're throwing out a TV. They threw out this. I can't believe it. This is incredible. Because, he would go and tweak it and it worked. So, the mattress came from the trash. The TV came from the trash. The sofa came from the trash. All that stuff came from the trash. And my mom would sit in the car and she would not get out. My dad and I thought it was fun and exciting. I didn't think about it at that time as a kid, 7 years old, or getting out and getting, that trash. So it was interesting, but, there was a lot of expectations and demands of me. And I think my parents never really got me, or at least they don't understand what was going on with me. It was always this whole thing of following rules and not being disruptive. And this goes against my brain. So to give you an example of how this manifested itself, and this is a little bit later in my life. So maybe as a teenager, I would say, or maybe between 12 and 14, somewhere around that. I would go out. So you take the bus to school, you come back by yourself, latchkey kid in the US, your parents aren't there. You can go out and play until the streetlights come on. But when they come on, I have to be home at dinner. All my friends knew if I'm not home at dinner by 6 o'clock, there's a problem. So my dad would get really pissed. And then you would think that people would sit around at dinner and have a conversation about their day. We don't do that. We're quiet at dinner. There's no talking. When you eat, you don't talk. And I have a hard time not talking, just sitting there and quiet. Or so I would move like my chair, and I would get in trouble for moving the chair. Maybe I get maybe more than just a verbal.
Mm-hmm.
So I would say that it was an interesting, what was being kind of anchored into me is that you're not supposed to speak up. You're not supposed to. I was always going against the grain. There was something I was doing that was wrong. I spent a lot of time in my room because I was sent to my room, but my room was my sanctuary. So there was no issues there. I would read the encyclopedia. I only had half of the encyclopedia. My parents could only afford A through M at that point. So I would read the
Right.
encyclopedia. Then later on, they got the rest of it. So then I bought myself a television, the one that you would change the channels with your hand. I know the kids are like, what are you talking about? But we have to do that with only 3 channels. But then
Was it color?
oh yeah, it was color. Yeah.
It was color, right?
Yeah, I got a color TV with the antenna, and I put like tinfoil on top so I can catch some UHF channel. Oh no, I got channel 48 or whatever that was. So I can watch the Three Stooges
Yeah.
for like the morning. But yeah, so that was sort of my childhood, and I had friends. I made a lot of friends with I'm an only child, so my friends became my brothers. That we became really close, and we would hang out at 2 friends. We hang out all like my 2 close friends. We hang out all the time, and school was an interesting thing for me too because it just never really connected to me. There were certain classes that I got stimulated and I was interested in, but very rarely. So this whole this whole thing of being disruptive became sort of my moniker. I was disrupt. I talk, and and sometimes I would talk back. I did have a lot of anger as a kid, but these teachers, like there was a teacher in seventh grade that was just so mean to me. And then at some point, he got me into an office and started yelling at me and telling me that I need to go back to Russia and all this stuff. And it was just there was a lot of that going on in school. So it was always underachiever. My dad would call me lazy, do nothing, like almost on a daily basis. If I don't wake up in the morning because I couldn't sleep well at night and never slept well because I listened to music to help me fall asleep, and I started recording things off the radio and with a little tape recorder. So he didn't know that I wasn't sleeping at night. He would pour water on me in the morning, so cold water to wake me up. So that was those are some of my experiences as a kid. But I'll tell you a couple other things. I was really close with. We came over my mom's parents, my grandparents. I was really close with my grandmother, my grandfather, sort of, but he had a stroke in the first year that we were here and proceeded to have multiple strokes over time. And that was really illuminating, scary, kind of odd. I wasn't really nice to him. I would, try to not make fun of him, but I couldn't understand as a kid what was going on. This large man who was like larger than life. We're not huge in my family. He was really a big man, 6'3", I think, like really large guy. And then all of a sudden he couldn't walk right. He couldn't talk right. So that always kind of frightened me in a way. And I remember my grandmother, my mom would sit there with bags of prescription medications and would talk to doctors once a month, at least, if not more, about this medication is causing this because this medication is mixed with this, and this dosing is wrong. And you proceed to have multiple strokes and all these other complications. And I saw that it was coming from this medication. So I kind of decided early on that medication wasn't for me. And I really didn't take prescription medication.
Yeah. Yeah. And I can imagine for children that people having strokes, because it's so sudden, and you know, yesterday you were able to walk, yesterday you were able to talk, and then today you can't. I had a mini stroke 5 years ago, and it's completely changed my life. And I used to worry about what my grandchildren thought because I couldn't play anymore. I couldn't be grandma. So it's interesting that your grandfather and your grandmother knowing, because I look at my medication and go, there's something not right here, right? It's not working for me. But when you have a brain injury or I've got epilepsy, if you want to drive, you have to take the drugs, right?
Yeah, I think there's a couple of things. First of all, communication is important. Nobody ever talked to me about it. It was just
Mm-hmm.
you're the kid. You're not supposed to know anything that's adult stuff. And I think if
Yeah.
somebody would have explained it to me, this is
Mm-hmm.
what's happening. I think I was smart enough and curious enough where I would understand if somebody said, "Well, this is what's happening. This is what the stroke is," and this what nobody said this to me. So that's why I think it was, my different expectations, different reaction to it. As far as medication goes, it's really unfortunate because we are in this system of sick care and we get all these medications to help us address a symptom. But the root cause, I mean, yeah, blood clots and all that stuff, but is there other things that we can do? And I'm not advocating for this, but when I was in the cannabis business, I mean, I've worked with hundreds of people with different types of seizure conditions and that were taking plant medicine and it was helping them tremendously. But as you said, if you're not going to take your prescription medication, you can lose your driver's license and other things, even though you're doing better with plant medicine instead of that.
Well, and that's the thing. It's what's recognized now, right? So the good thing, like in the States, cannabis is legalized, right? It's a choice. It's something that can be used. Over here, it's not. it's still a rarity to be able to use even cannabis oil. It's still, not something that you can easily access. And
It's not really a choice. So in the US, as of today, cannabis is a Schedule 1 narcotic. It was recommended by Donald Trump to reschedule to Schedule 3. That Schedule 3, which is prescription, you get prescribed as a controlled substance,
right.
that has not been enacted yet on a federal level. So states, yeah, there are, I think, 38, if I'm not mistaken, I could be off a state or two,
Mm-hmm.
states that have a cannabis program. There are a good percentage of them that have adult use or recreational use. So all you have to do is show that you're 21 and you can go into a store and you can pick out, cannabis that you want. Other states have medicinal cannabis. So you have to get a medical card for a condition and then you go into a store and get your cannabis, whatever it is, cannabis oil. CBD is not sold like that. CBD is not permitted to be sold, which is not intoxicating. It's not permitted to be sold in California in dispensaries. It's sold in smoke shops and other places. So the regulations are not clear and are state by state. And what you put in your body from one place to another varies. What the testing regulations are, it varies. So I would say it's mature as a market, but as a system for medicinal or therapeutic purposes, and not at all.
Not yet. Not yet. Do you think it will become?
Well, yeah, it's a must because now if it's going to be rescheduled to Schedule 3,
Yeah.
that means that there's two things that happen. It opens up research. So there's going to be real clinical research, clinical trials, human clinical trials at some point. So you'll have pharmaceutical drugs, and we have a couple of them now. We have Epidiolex for epilepsy for Dravet syndrome. So that's one FDA approved drug, but it's not intoxicating, mostly cannabidiol. CBD. And Sativax did not pass. It's a 1-to-1. It did not pass the phase 3 trial, but it's being used in different places around the world as a therapeutic medicine. So that's potential as well. So it will be prescribed. It will be studied. The challenge with that is the pharmaceutical industry is very comfortable with single molecule medications and drugs. So they take a molecule. They try to do this with THC. They create a marinol, which is a synthetic type of cannabis. The challenge with that is the cannabis has hundreds of components: cannabinoids, flavonoids, terpenoids. So this doesn't really work well with the pharmaceutical industry because they're not used to synthesize. You can't do all that. Now, there is a apparel industry that's being regulated, like the nutraceutical industry. So when I live in Los Angeles, but I'm from Philadelphia. If I go and buy my multivitamin, my supplement, and it has a label on there, it's approved by the USDA or whatever, I know that I don't have to worry about it. It'll be identical in Los Angeles as it is in Philadelphia, California, Pennsylvania, same. But with cannabis, it's not. So at some point, there needs to be a regulating body, which is probably the USDA, FDA, whoever it is, a combination of both, that's going to say this is a drug, this is something that is prescribed, but this combination of components is a nutraceutical. You still need to get permission, but what you're putting in your body is labeled on there, so you know exactly what's in there. The combination of those cannabinoids and flavonoids and terpenes are associated with an effect, and they're associated with a condition. Now they can start taking that specific oil that has all those components and matching it to a specific disease or condition. And let's look in observational / clinical studies to see what's working. So there is a vehicle that's available for them, and it will need to be legal. And then you have sort of your I guess small batch cultivators, and it's the same thing as I hate comparing it to the alcohol industry, but you have the large distilleries, the Anheuser-Busch's, and then you have your local shop, that brews their own. So I think it'll be something similar to that'll happen, but it needs to be fully legalized, fully compliant, because to get out of the dark ages, we need to know what we're putting in our bodies, and we need to have consistency, and we need to have oversight as far as testing goes.
Yeah. Yeah. It's very important that we have that consistency because as you said, one plant or one purchase is not the same as another, and there's no consistency, even within a shop, I gather.
Mm-hmm.
So with attention deficit disorder, so does that continue to play out in your adult life, or is it something that is really part of who you are, right? It isn't a problem. It's just, this is how I am.
I mean, it's not a problem for me because I
Yeah.
learned how to navigate around this is who I am. You're absolutely right. So I think that people don't understand, and even experts in ADD don't understand. It's interesting to me because a lot of experts, a lot of doctors that treat people with ADD don't have ADD. So I find it fascinating that they're telling me the way just because you see something on a scan doesn't mean that you feel what I'm feeling. You don't have that condition or whatever it's called. So it's hard for me to really take these people seriously unless they have the condition themselves. And I think it starts with understanding your genetics. So there are genetic predispositions to ADHD. And if you have a combination of several genetic markers, it's called polygenic, you're expressing that epigenetically more likely than not. So you can have a genetic predisposition to ADHD and never have it turn on. So basically you're born with depletion of dopamine. So you're not secreting as much dopamine as the average person, but your brain is always searching for the next squirt or hit of dopamine.
Right.
And that means that it's hard for you to focus and concentrate on certain things that are not creating that, especially when there's potential dopamine distractions elsewhere. My Siri just thought I was talking to her for some reason and started asking questions. I don't know.
Yeah.
So
Wow.
yeah, so that's really what you need to be aware of, that if there is that potential, your brain is constantly trying to get out of this conversation and
Mm-hmm.
focus over here because potentially there's dopamine right there. So
Yeah.
it takes guardrails. It takes sort of this system that allows you not to do that. But
Yeah.
if you sort of give into it, then all of a sudden you have squirrel moments all the time. What's over there? Shiny object. You're chasing them all the time,
Yeah.
and that makes it more difficult.
That's really interesting. That really is very interesting because I've been to different, trying to find out what's going on with me. I've been to so many different specialists, and I did have a test, and I am based on my behaviour and my preference and everything. I thought it was a pretty easy test to get tested, and but I now have ADHD diagnosed professionally, but I can see now that I understand more about it. Good old Chat GPT has taught me a little bit, and I can see that I've always had it. It's just that on top of having ADHD, I was also a good girl, right? So, and I would get all my work done, but be finished quickly and whatever. So, but I was a good girl. And so I didn't get negatively identified as other, like as the naughty boys who were running around and fighting or whatever. I didn't get labeled in the same way, but I can see that, I was on, I don't know, the spectrum or whatever of having it. And now, because my brain doesn't work the same way as it used to work, I can really, really see it, and I have less choice in it.
The diagnosis itself is an issue, because just because somebody took a survey or a questionnaire, they then say, "Oh, you have ADHD." Well, I mean, can you answer questions differently and not have ADHD then tomorrow if you take it again? These surveys don't really mean a lot to me. I like the genetic part of it because that's
Mm.
what it is. You have a genetic predisposition and you can check if that's been methylated or not. But I think if you talk to people that have ADHD or have some sort of neurodivergence, I was never the kid that was hyperactive. I never had this running around. I can't sit still in class. That wasn't me. My thing was I was daydreaming. I was doodling. I was not paying attention. It was not interesting to me. So my mind wants to go to something to make it more interesting. But I think the diagnosis of a disorder makes you feel there's something wrong with you. You have a disorder. And when you have a disorder, you can do several things with that. You can use it as a crutch. Well, can't do that because I have ADHD. I have a disorder. Here, take a look. It's right here. It's written here. Got to get myself out of this because I have a disorder.
Mm-hmm.
So that's one way to look at it. Or you can look at it as I have a real advantage. What does it mean to have ADHD? Well, one of the benefits is I can recognize unrelated things as patterns and I can multitask like that. Well, it's impossible to multitask. Look, I read 100 different books. There's a book written by Gary Keller, who's the founder of Keller Williams Realty, who's one of the biggest real estate companies in the U.S. and North America, possibly. And he wrote this book, The One Thing. You cannot do more than one thing at a time. If you want to be successful, you have to focus on one thing. That's for him. And that's the way he's successful. I mean, you're going to tell us Sir Richard Branson that you can only focus on one thing? He's got 400 companies. No, Richard, you cannot do 400. You can only do one because you can only be successful one at a time. It doesn't make sense. And this narrative that we shove down everybody's throat of, if you're not like me, you have a disorder. Something's wrong with you.
Yeah.
Well, if I'm not like you, that means that I am somewhere on the spectrum of neurodivergence. My brain doesn't work like your brain. But neither does Elon Musk's, and neither do 80% of billionaires in this world that think differently. It's I call it modern genius because really that's what it is. When I was a kid, we had a class for slower kids. Some of these kids weren't slow. They just learned differently. And I learned differently. And I just think that when you said, you're diagnosed and now you have this and that, and you always have, of course you always had this, but it didn't become a acknowledged challenge that you had to overcome until somebody stamped you with this scarlet letter that you're wearing this badge of, oh no, disorder, here it is. So.
Well, yeah, because before it was my brilliance, right? It was my, the word is not, ruthlessness is not right, but I was ruthless in finding an answer. I would continue to go and go and go and work hours and hours and hours until I'd solved a problem, right? Just within myself, not within other people. I just was like a dog with a bone. I just would not give it up. But then that can be called tenacity, right?
So with ADD, there's two parts, and I'm just talking about myself. And actually, I can talk about other people as well because I wrote a book on it. But I'll give myself as an example because it shows up differently in different people. And there's that spectrum effect. But there's two things. Dopamine is the anchor. So you can either go on different directions to try to find dopamine now. Where am I getting this from? Or you hyper focus because you're being stimulated. So if you're doing research and you're so interested in trying to find and solve it, you will sit there until you solve it because it's exciting, it's interesting, and it's stimulating, and it's getting that dopamine hit. So the more you do it, the more dopamine secreted. The more you do it, the more dopamine secreted. And that's what happens when we procrastinate as people with ADHD. So I'll say, I don't have a really good sense of time. But shit, when my back is against the wall and I need to get there, I need to finish a project, I will work tenacity, as you said. I will work hyper focused because all my dopamine, I have to get it done. And that anchors that in a neurochemical release. The same way as you're doing something that interests you so much, research. Like for me, I used to paint. I guess I still do once in a blue moon, but not as much as I used to. So I would paint, and that would be my hyper focus mode. I don't know. Nothing else is happening in the world right now. I'm connected with this painting and I'm having an interaction. The more I do it, the more dopamine. And I'm doing it for hours. And I'm not thinking about, oh, I need to make a phone call. I need to do this. Like a million things that always go through my mind because I'm hyper focused on that. So if you can start priming yourself for that, now that's the start of creating the guardrails for your own version of ADD. And I, I don't want to use myself as an example, like you would a dog when you train a dog. But when you train a dog, the dog is supposed to, when they do something good, they get a reward. So you're stimulating their dopamine center, and they remember, oh, well, I just went outside or I did this and I got a treat. That stimulates dopamine. So I'm anchoring that and I'm going to do it again and again and again because I'm getting a treat. So we need to do that to ourselves. And we need to be able to reward ourselves at the end with a dopamine hit, even if we're doing something we don't love in the moment. And I think this is the thing to be able to remember. I mean, everybody in general, but especially people with ADHD, they say they can't focus. I can't. Get that word out of your mouth.
Yeah.
You haven't yet, not can't.
Yeah.
You will, but you just haven't got to it yet. And it's this thing of discipline. And this is the hardest thing to do with an ADHD brain is to discipline yourself. Like, you do habits, you do this for a few weeks and you'll get it. In 28 days, you form a habit. It's there for life. No, it's not. Not for me. No, it doesn't. I have to do it for as long as I have to do it. But it's that carrot, that dangling. Going to the gym. I am not a fan of going to the gym. Once I get there, I'm fine with it. But it's like, hey, let's go to the gym, work out. I'm not that guy. But I go 4 or 5 days a week. But I love the sauna. Love it. That's my moment of like relaxation. So I know that going to the gym equals sauna. And if I spray some eucalyptus in there, it's even better. So I'm going to the gym to do the workout so I can hurry up and get to the sauna. And that's sort of my anchor, my dopamine hit. So these are the things that we need to practice.
Isn't that so interesting? So dopamine, I'm going to have to study dopamine more to really understand it because I know, pardon me, I know that it's related to a lot of the neurological problems like Parkinson's and things like that. And very, very interesting.
Parkinson's is also like all these different conditions. We talk about inflammation. They're inflammatory conditions or autoimmune responses. And it's funny how interconnected we are. We're in the middle of a clinical trial. We just finished Alzheimer's and starting on Parkinson's now, where I think we started next autism. But it's interesting how interrelated all of them are because they have a lot to do with this galactin-3 protein as amyloid plaque. The same plaque that's in our arteries is the plaque that clogs our brain arteries or synaptic transmission. But nobody connected the dots for a long time. And it has to do a lot with the type of nutrients, the type of food that we put in our bodies. Now, on Alzheimer's, for instance, there's a couple of genes called APOE4, and those genes are associated with a greater potential to express Alzheimer's. However, if you're going to also eat unhealthy, a lot of omega-6s, seed oils, all these different things that clog your arteries, well, you're probably 50% more likely to develop Alzheimer's than if you didn't. And even if you didn't have the genetic predisposition and you were still, consuming those things, you're on the higher risk to develop Alzheimer's, even though you may not be predisposed to that. So it's pretty simple. Do the things that are associated with minimizing or mitigating the expression of your genetic predispositions. And most people don't even know their genetics. They have no idea. They do their DNA report to find out, what origin their ancestry came from. Okay, I think that's important, but don't you want to know your own GPS of life? Like prior to this, I had an eye exam. My eyes seemed off a little bit. So I had an eye exam today and I get one. It's been a little bit over a year and I'm watching TV and it seems fuzzy. And the other thing is I don't need readers. Yeah. But if I don't take off my glasses, I can't really read because I need them from far away. And now I have to find that middle ground to where I'm reading as well. I'm in my mid 50s, so it's probably normal. So almost 2 years ago, I got my eye exam, and my prescription got better. So I was less negative, also 0.25 on both eyes, less, even better.
Wow.
Or more, I guess, since I'm
Yeah.
subtracting more. So I go to get an eye exam today, and I'm like, yeah, it's my vision's a little bit off, and I think I need new glasses. And she's like, you're right, your eyes got better again. I'm like, is that even possible? Another negative 2.5 on both eyes, higher. I'm like, is that even possible? He's like, yeah, you're getting closer to 20/20 vision. How is that possible? She's like, you probably have good genetics. I'm like, oh. My mom cannot say, she can't see far like me, not that bad, but she can still read. She's almost 80, and she can still read without readers. My dad sees great far away, but he needs readers. So I got the combination, I think, of both of them, the recessive genes, and now
Yeah.
my eyes are getting better with age. How? Doesn't make any sense, but maybe it's in my genes.
Well, that's right. And that brings me to the company that you're created now, that you're CEO of, working with, uncovering. So you work. Explain your company.
Yeah, I think, just to connect it with cannabis and then get out of that just to make sure I come full circle. So what was happening was when I moved to Los Angeles from Philadelphia, I was trying to figure out what to do. I was a commercial real estate broker, and
Mm-hmm.
it's 2009, not a great time for real estate. And I was kind of burned out because 2008 was just a brutal year. We all know that, the real estate collapse, what was happening. So I was trying to figure it out, and the universe brought me an opportunity. And these guys wanted to open up alternative pharmacy, ended up being a dispensary. So they offered me a partnership, and we opened up a dispensary. Then we opened up another one. Then we opened up another one. We ended up getting 5. We only opened up 4. But the one thing that I started to see was 2 people will consume the same varietal and a complete different experience. So we're talking about hyperfocus. That was my hyperfocus moment. I was like on the internet trying to research, and I found a video of this guy that's doing genetic sequencing of the plant. And he was explaining, like, you have this plant, it's called one thing, but when I sequence it, it doesn't have those components that are related to this specific chemical variety. So I was fascinated, and ended up working with them, and they taught me how to do genetic sequencing in the plant. So I would extract DNA from plants and pipette it. And I was in the lab and the code and doing all that stuff. And I was just like fascinated by that. It's super cool. And their parent company was doing what's called pharmacogenomics. So it's a study of how drugs affect individual bodies and that contraindication, drug to drug interaction we talked about earlier. So I got into human genetics, and I was like, well, we have plant genetics here. We have human genetics here. Let's bring those two together. And
Yeah.
they didn't want to do that. They were focusing on the plant. They actually closed down the human side. So I was like, okay, opportunities. So I took some scientists with me and launched EndoDNA, my company, now in 2017. So the first foray was an endocannabinoid system test. It was a test of your own endocannabinoid system, genetic test. And we got a patent on that for the use of DNA to make recommendations associated with the endocannabinoid system. We have tens of thousands of customers all over the world, 9 different countries, including Australia, UK, everywhere. And then I got a call from a doctor friend of mine back in like early 2024. And she said, look, I'm seeing a lot of younger women. They're in their late 20s, early 30s with perimenopause symptoms.
Yeah.
And I'm seeing a lot of women in menopause that are experiencing menopause, but having really adverse effects: hot flash severity, hot flash frequency, weight gain, sleep issues, all those things. So is there a way we can get ahead of these? I was like, yeah, for sure. I always say yes, and I figured out later. It's my
Yeah.
entrepreneurial kind of shortcut. So then I figured it out, and we met with the team, and we built a female hormone health test. Then I realized in talking to other colleagues that there's menopause. It's like, menopause? No, I should be in full-fledged menopause. It's called andropause, actually. It's the male version of menopause. where,
Yeah.
we have hormone changes, a lot of different things that happen to men as well. So we build a male hormone health test. And then I kind of flipped the company and said, we're going to focus on helping doctors. We're going to be a B2B company. We still have an endocannabinoid system test. That's the only one that's available to the public. Everything else, we serve doctors. We're going to provide doctors enough testing and a platform that allows them to do precision medicine. That's what I want for myself. So I was
Yeah.
going to talk in front of a bunch of doctors, and I was going deep into genetics. I'm not a geneticist. I'm just like, a guy who's interested in like called a polymath, I guess. I'm just
Yeah.
interested in a bunch of different things. So I got deep into genetics, my understanding of it. And I was talking to him about different allele combinations and all these different things. And at the end, I was like, any questions? No questions at all. Like, man, I didn't do that great of a job, but I left my email and my phone number in the last slide. And within 30 minutes, I started getting text messages and emails from different doctors that were asking me questions. And I realized two things. They didn't want to ask a question in front of their colleagues, number one. Number two, they don't really understand genetics. And I started talking to my doctor friends like, we had a class back in medical school, or we had a class in graduate school. Or we don't use it right now. Most of them. There's doctors that know, of course, but most of them, because we're so siloed, we have specialties. You go to an endocrinologist and you go from this person. They all have specialties. So, and they don't interact. So I said to my team, I said, we need to build our platform with a built-in way for doctors to interrogate the genome. Let's get them comfortable that they can ask questions of the platform about anything they don't know. Now they'll be informed and they can have an intelligent conversation with their patient and really have a true partnership for their healthcare journey. So we built EndoDNA with that specific LLM that allows them to chat with their DNA, interrogate it, look at their genetics, look at their labs, ask it questions, create a treatment plan that's specific to the individual that the doctor then approves or modifies. Now you have a treatment plan. The doctor has your treatment plan. You're hopefully doing the things that the treatment plan is suggesting for you. And then you can come back in 12 weeks or whenever you're going to do your next blood draw. And we're going to see what has been turned on or what has been turned off. So you have your genetics. That's your genetic encoding. And then you have your epigenetic. It's the switches that have been turned on based on things that you did. So the food that you put in your body, the exposure to heavy metals, other chemicals, or your own neurochemistry. So if you're walking around with stress spikes throughout the day where cortisol is being secreted into your bloodstream, but it's not the morning, you don't need it, your immune system becomes over or under, it's expressing itself over under where you need it. So if you have predispositions, that's where the autoimmune conditions come in. Your immune system's overreacting. So it's actually overreacting to your own body or something that's going on internally or underreacting to that. And if you have gut health issues and you have predispositions to that, it can turn those on as well. So anyway, the idea is to be able to bookend the experience. Not only are you creating patient-reported outcome, you have the epigenetic test, you have wearable data from your wearable device. All that comes back to the doctors. So when you see them again, they can track how well their protocol, their treatment plan is working for you and to tweak that. So it's always longitudinal care, means getting ahead of these conditions before they express themselves. And I think that's really what healthcare should be instead of sick care, where we're just addressing the symptom instead of the root cause.
Yeah, that sounds really interesting. So what is there a specific branch of doctors that use it? Are they more the functional medicine doctors
Yeah.
that use it?
Yeah, I would say functional medical or integrative medical professionals. They're most of our customers, and also doctors that specialize in hormone health, doctors that are looking at cognitive health. So we have a lot of doctors, psychiatrists, or doing neuro research, neurological research. Yeah, those are pretty much who our customers are. It's not, in the U.S. we do a fantastic job at acute care, like the
Yes.
surgery.
Yeah.
If I have a fracture, fantastic. Best in the world, I would say, up against anyone else. Chronic conditions, I would say we're lacking. And the reason why is because the idea of giving you a pill for a symptom doesn't necessarily solve the root cause of what's going on, but that's how it's conditioned. So this is the way I want to be treated. We all want to be treated as individuals, and doctors don't have the time or they don't have the incentive. So when you have cash-based functional medical professionals, they can do a full analysis and assessment of you and really continue to get ahead of them. But you have to do the work. You can't just depend on the doctor. And that's when it's difficult because a pill is easy. Hey, my elbow hurts. Take a pill for that. Keeps hurting. Keeps hurting. I see it with my parents, but if you can get ahead of that and say, okay, I need to hold myself accountable to put good things in my body, to exercise, to, have mindfulness practice, all these different things, get good quality sleep. Now I am accountable for my own health and wellness. So not just, hey, I'm going to take a pill for that.
Yeah. Yeah. To me, that sounds absolutely obvious that we would have healthcare, that we would learn what is best for us. I would love to be able to have something that could give me the clues to, what are the switches that are already switched on and that I can switch off. That would be because people used to say, doctors say, we're constantly generating malformed cells that could become cancer. It just depends on our immune system to flush out our system and to manage those bad cells. And so, I didn't understand that until the last 5 years. I did not understand. It was probably akin to talking about death, right? Like nobody wants to talk about that either. But talking about potential bad health. But I think forewarned is forearmed or something. We have an opportunity. So Len, in your extremely broad life, I haven't asked you the suddenly different question, but I can see the pattern of your grandfather's stroke and the grandmother's pill. I can see the things that you've done in your life from the things you've already shared. But is there another thing that you would say was a suddenly different moment that helps also bring your life sort of to the trajectory that it is today?
I think it's many moments of taking action. So I think a lot of people are getting ready to get ready and they're afraid of failure. And I'm not saying I don't have any fears. I have plenty of fears. I do it anyway. So I think this is one other moment that was illuminating to me going back. So when I was homeless or whatever you want to call it, unhoused, I guess they call it these. And then I started working at this record store when I started going to university, and I was a physical therapy major, and I never intended to be in medicine, but I got some of that information. I really liked music. Music was my thing. So I started working at this record store called Tower Records. It's no longer around, but that was the greatest record store in the world. And I got paid $7 an hour, but I got perks. Concert tickets and, these labels were coming, all kinds of different things. So I was invited to this festival. It was called the Horde Festival. And I remember the Black Crowes and Blues Travelers, Ziggy Marley, all these different musicians were playing there. And I went there with the girl I was seeing at the time. And we saw this table that it said the Cannabis Action Network. And there was a bunch of people there with like papers on their table. And I was like, what are you guys doing? I said, we're registering people to vote. I said, great. I'm already registered to vote. What else can I do? Like, well, take some pamphlets. It's for legalization. I'm like, but what are you guys doing? Registering people to vote. So anyway, I became the president of the Cannabis Action Network because this is not going to happen. Like, you have something here. You're at a festival. Let's take action. And I decided to hold a rally. It was the first rally for legalization of cannabis in Philadelphia. And it was in 1993, maybe 94, somewhere around there, 93, 94. And it was at Independence Hall where the Constitution, Declaration of Independence are, where they were writing, documents on hemp paper, some of them, which I found ironic and interesting. Federal Rangers, and my keynote speaker was this woman named Elvie Musica. And Elvie was one of the first people to get medically prescribed cannabis under a NIDA program in the United States, under a federal program, defunct now, but 16 people were getting federal cannabis. And I was like, well, that doesn't make any sense. It's federally illegal, Schedule 1, which means that it has no medicinal purposes, but then you're prescribing it to people. So that's a juxtaposition. It doesn't make any sense. And also you're growing it, you're cultivating it at University of Mississippi, and you're packaging it and you're rolling little cigarettes with a USDA label on them that she had, and she lit up in front of federal rangers. And I was like, yes, this is incredible. It only took 30 years to legalize in Pennsylvania from that moment, but it's okay. We planted a seed, no pun intended. And then the next morning, my girlfriend was an artist, and she had this sculpture that we built, this big sculpture in my place. And everybody stayed over after the rally. All the people from the Cannabis Action Network, had some musicians there, and we got woken up to a loud noise, something like crash, bang, whatever. And Elvie walked into the statue and broke it. And the reason why is Elvie had degenerative glaucoma. She was legally blind. She wore big, thick glasses and couldn't see anything until she medicated with cannabis. And I was like, I don't understand. I'm taking cannabis for my ADHD. You're taking cannabis for your glaucoma, which is, by the way, documented that it works. Just nerve pressure and stuff like that. So that was the moment I sort of realized that, wait a second. First of all, this plant is amazing and it can be used as medicine. Second of all, it's personalized. I'm having a different experience with a plant than you're having. And we may be both consuming the same plant or maybe different components. And that was a really interesting experience to sort of say, first of all, take action. Don't be afraid to fail, because there's no such thing. It's just an education that you learn. All right, if I do it again, I would do it differently. I would do some things the same, but do some things differently. So take action. Intake that information and build on those experiences. They're all sort of these steps, these stepping stones. If you stand on one, you already did it. Now, don't stay stagnant. I think that's one of the things that's been a driver. I don't want to be just stagnant sitting there. I have too many of my friends who are miserable at their jobs, and all of a sudden they blinked and it's been 18 years and they're sitting in the same chair, in their same cubicle, rinse and repeat over and over. I don't want that for me. So I don't mind, some people like the steadiness of life. I prefer a little bit of excitement. And sometimes that excitement is, your business didn't do well. So guess what? You're not going to pay yourself this month. How many months? I don't know. You're going to figure it out. And those kind of challenges, going back to the ADD thing, they're dopamine stimulating as well. So I don't like that. So I'm going to walk around that sharp corner. But the only way that I know the sharp corner is there is because I walked into it before.
Yeah. 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 Pardon me. That is, you have such an interesting way of telling your story. And, I'm my mind at the moment is like seeing the patterns and, even with the, physical therapy stuff, all of what you've learned has led you to be where you are now, going to a concert, like everything that you've done. And it is irrelevant of the time between the one thing and the other thing. They all have still led. So there've been those minor changes in the trajectory, and you are where you are right now, and doing, providing a service to doctors that is so, it is independence making, right? For the patient, right? we get to choose. I know that, there's all this fear that gets put up if um, if the insurance companies know your genetics, then they won't insure you and blah, blah, blah. But there's always naysayers, right? There's always different consequences of different things. But for someone who has lost my health or had a change in trajectory of my health, and I'm seeking constantly different answers, right? Different examples of people, different thinking processes, different actions that have been taken. And you are like the polymath of that, and which is so fantastic. I just thank you so much for being on Suddenly Different. And when I hear your story, it's not simply a celebration of a mind that works differently. It's a being that chooses difference, right? That knows that dopamine is something he likes, but he uses it for good and not evil. It is for others. Everything that you've said has been, I haven't heard you once say that your motivation was so that you could have more things, right? You were thinking about others. You were thinking about how the cannabis could be used differently for different people, for different ailments. You were talking about people having choice and going back to that 7-year-old who was different, right? Had a different language, came from the other side of the wall, and may have been misunderstood by many, and the prejudices that you would have faced is terribly unfortunate. And I hope that one day humanity is better at it. I know that today we're not. We still have those prejudices against the people that we don't know, but you've thrived beyond it, right? You've kept on going. It didn't stop you. You've created businesses. You're an entrepreneur. You've made a difference, and you are just a great example of I choose moving forward. I know that I can bang my leg. I know that I can have a trip over, but I choose to move forward. And that is the example that more humans need to see. So I really thank you for coming on the show.
Thank you. I mean, that means a lot, and I appreciate everything you said. And not perfect by any means. I went through a pretty difficult divorce. I would say about 14 years ago or so. I thought there was an experience in my life that was going to take me down, and I think for a year it did. But I think one of the things that you just mentioned, it's this resilience, that the motivation of I can rely on myself. Like, I know no matter what happens, I will find a way out. And this is the thing that I try to instill in my daughter, my family. Like, your parents are there for you. That's great. But when it's tough, you can rely on yourself. You have more within yourself than you even think. So when you squeeze it out and there's nothing left, there is plenty left. Just keep squeezing.
Yeah. And that's a great bumper sticker. There's plenty left. Keep squeezing. Look, I thank you so much, and keep going with your research and all of the tools that can help help the health industry help us with our health. Thank you. Take care. This has been Suddenly Different. I'm Leigh-Anne Charland, and I'm so grateful you shared your time with me. If you felt a spark, a tear, or a moment of recognition, I hope you'll pass that gift along by sharing this show. Take a deep breath, trust your path, and I'll meet you back here soon.